are going to be 15/16. I'm going to take this headstock down to thickness now. So I made this line right behind the low E string tuner, and I just took the same measurement off the fretboard, which happened to be 5/8 on each side. Draw your line, and I'm going to take it to the bandsaw, and I'll use the bandsaw to take it down to thickness. I also made a mark on the tip of my headstock there so I could line it up with my bandsaw. And I went a little bit more than 1/2 inch to leave a little bit of room for sanding. So in order to cut this, I'm going to be using a backer here, which is just a piece of MDF. I've got a nice level surface on the bottom here to ride the table. And to get the correct angle, I'll then just double stick tape my neck to my backer board here. That way I can run it through and get a nice straight finish there, right along the line. Now after I've run it through a bandsaw, then I'll just finish off this cut with a fine tooth handsaw to get that remaining piece off. Then I'll just shape this with a rasp and a file to get that radius. Now I'm going to make my little cover over here for the truss rod wheel, and I'll just do that by hand. I'll try to match the grain up as best I can, and then just using some files and some sandpaper, I'll just shape it to fit in there as tight as I can. Now I'm ready to start shaping out this neck. So I'm going to start laying it out, and I'll show you how I do it. It's pretty simple, pretty basic. A lot of other guys do it the same way. The first thing you're going to want to do is make your center marks. Top and bottom, draw your line. Now from the bottom of your heel, I go 3 1/4 inches. I'll make a mark on each side. Just connect the marks. That's what's going to be sitting in the neck pocket on the guitar. Now from that line, I'll go up another inch. Make a mark right in your center line. Now from that center line, I'll just connect to our other mark. Okay, now none of this matters. Could remove those lines now. Because none of this is going to be touched now. flip it over to the side, and I'll make a mark from the 14th fret over here to where our mark meets over there at the 3 1/4 mark. The same thing on the other side. Now over at the other end, I'll just go from that curve right there, bring it to our center line. Over here, I'll bring it from about where the point of that curve is. Bring it to the center line. Now this next part really depends on the style neck you want, the kind of shape you want. If you're going for a V, you can just leave the center line right down the middle and pretty much just take out maybe about 3/8 up here, maybe 1/2 inch, and draw your line right down here. Then you could just take off from the center line up to this mark right here. Just shave all that out of there. And if you did it on both sides, that'll give you a V shape. All you've got to do then is round this over a little bit. If you want to do a C shape, then you could go up about roughly 1/4 inch, 3/8 right there. Draw your line all the way across. Do the same thing on this half row line. Make your marks on the side of the neck. That way you're only taking off a little bit at a time and it's giving you more of a C shape. This one I'm going to do more of a D shape, so I'll probably come up a little bit higher on both sides. And that's leaving the majority of this flatter then, and then I'll start rounding it over. So it's just a matter of the shape you want, and it depends on where you're going to put the lines. And you don't really have to be that precise about it. The lines are pretty much just guides to keep you symmetrical on both sides for your shaping. So I'm going to be doing more of a D shape. So down here I'm going to mark 3/8. At this end, I'll do 1/2 inch just to taper it. And on the sides, I went 1/2 inch and off the edge. Okay, and then using a coarse rasp like this, I'm going to start taking out from line to line and start shaping it. And then as I get closer to where I want to be, then I'll just switch up to finer files. Okay, here I've got the shape of the neck roughly filed out. And you can see there's a lot of deep scratch marks from the rough file. So now I'll just go over with a finer file and clean that up. Now I'm going to shape this part right here from behind the nut to the tuner where it slopes. And I'll just be using the half round end of the rasp. So I'll measure from the back of the nut. I'll make a mark about an 1/8 inch back. On both ends. And just draw your line. Then I'll take it from that point and just round it out. Now that I've got that pretty much where I want it, I'm just going to clean up some of these marks left behind from the bandsaw. Once I've got a file down, I'll just take my scraper and level everything out. And it also makes for a nice smooth transition right there. And after I'm done with this, it'll be ready for a sand. Well, now the neck shaping is done. The only thing I've got left to do is a little bit of sanding. Towards the end, I like to use these scrapers, these cabinet scrapers, especially the curved one there. It's great for the final shaping of the neck, and it also gets rid of all the file marks, so you barely have any sanding to do once you're done scraping. Another thing I like to do is, as I'm scraping, is I'll use a straight edge, and I'll run it along the neck as I'm going, just to make sure there's not any high spots. If there are, I'll take it down as I'm scraping. Now we can move on to finishing up the inlays and the fretwork. I'm about to drill out for my side markers here, and I'll use the exact same method as I used on the top of the fretboard. I'll mark a line, how far in I want to go into the fretboard. Then I'll run the blue tape and make it easier to see. Mark out my centers, and then just using a small punch again, just mark out where you're going to be drilling. Now these fret markers I'm using, same thing, abalone, and they're really shallow, so I'm not too worried about drilling them straight. I'm not going to get crazy with setting up some jig to keep the fretboard straight. My main concern is just keeping them centered, because you're not going to notice if they're a little crooked anyway by the time you sand them down. To install the inlays, I'm going to be using epoxy for a couple of reasons. I've got a little bit of time to work with it instead of using CA glue or crazy glue. So I've got a little bit of time to work. This is fast setting. It'll be setting up in about 5 minutes. And the other reason is because if I have any voids underneath the inlay, if I drill a little bit too deep, at least the epoxy will make a nice solid surface underneath there. After the epoxy cures, I'll just take my radius sander and knock all these back down level. But before I start sanding, I leveled out the fretboard to make sure that there's no bow either way. Make sure, because this is going to be my finished sanding right here. Now I'm just going to hit the side dot markers here. So I leveled out all the fret markers, and that I did using 220 on the beam. After 220, I went straight to 600. Then I jumped from 600 to 1,000 grit, and then from 1,000 I went to 1,500. And just look at that shine on there.